Asteroid Day 2018. As some of you may know, the UN has labeled Asteroid Day as a global day of education. And it's important because the risks are great. We're sitting here on this day because this was the day in 1908 that an asteroid struck the Tunguska in Siberia, leveling an area bigger than any metropolitan city on Earth today. With me now are two of the key players in Asteroid Day. Ed Lieu is an astronaut and astrophysicist through his organization, the B6112 Foundation. He's dedicated to protecting our planet from asteroid strikes. He's done everything from overseeing Google Street View and Google Maps to spending 6 months on board the International Space Station, spending 206 days in space. Also with me, Tom Jones, scientist, author, astronaut, pilot. He flew B-52D strategic bombers, among many other things, and has flown on 4 space shuttle missions. He also has been studying asteroids for years. So it is wonderful to have both of you with us to talk about such a crucial topic. And let me start with you. The Trump administration just came out with a report this month, 18 pages, on asteroids and our preparedness for them. What's your gut reaction to this report?
Well, I think we've been looking forward to this report for a while. This is actually a follow-on to a previous report in which they laid out their primary goals. This report is on how they intend to meet those goals. So the actual plans for finding and tracking asteroids and the tests for deflecting an asteroid should we actually find one on its way.
So, Tom, what do you make of that? Where are we right now on this crucial issue? You know, we've all seen, obviously, the movie, right? The Tom Hanks movie, and that sort of has captured the popular imagination. But when you talk now about intercepting or deflecting an asteroid, where are we right now?
Well, it's good to have a plan. It's good to test the plan. And I think where we are today is we have an idea of how we can apply space technology to deflecting an asteroid that's on a collision course with Earth. But we don't really know whether that plan is going to work unless we test it. And I think what NASA has done in its action plan is to outline the need for an actual space demonstration of a deflection. And so we would send a spacecraft, in this case it's called DART for a dual asteroid redirection test, smacking into an asteroid, a harmless asteroid, in about 2022, and then measure the effects of that. So where we are today is we know of a lot of asteroids. None are headed our way, but the test that's planned would prove that we can put our space skills together with our international partners and actually do something where we get warning of a rogue asteroid.
Wow. All right. So that we're getting there, and we're actually, we were looking at the time frame. By the way, I think I confused my action heroes. Bruce Willis, right? Not Tom Hanks. So Ed, the report concludes, as you read through it here, quote, NASA and its partners have identified more than 95% of all asteroids that are large enough to cause a global catastrophe, and none of those found poses a threat within the century. So, you and I were talking about this as we got ready for this discussion. You said to come away from that thinking, okay, the problem is solved, nothing to worry about, would not be the right takeaway, right?
No, and in fact, the report even points this out. The report points out that they have found 95% of the very largest of asteroids, the ones that would wipe out human civilization, or at least make it completely different than what we have today. The report points out is that the smaller asteroids, ones that might only destroy a country or only collapse the world economy or only kill 50 million people or something like that, or all the way down to just a few million people, those ones are not yet found, and that's our current task.
I mean, it's terrifying. You're talking about, as you point out, only 50 million people. I mean, I guess it depends on the definition of
it's
the
a
word
whole
catastrophic,
range.
but that would certainly be catastrophic to human civilization as we all have experienced it. Tom, there's an argument out there put out by a former Microsoft technologist now who argues in the journal Icarus that the data out there about asteroids, specifically from NASA, might be wrong. We might not really even know the sizes of what's out there. And if you don't know what you're looking at, how do you know what to be afraid of, or how do you know what could strike? How confident, Tom, are you right now in our technology to know what's out there, to know what could strike Earth?
Well, NASA's been looking for rogue asteroids, particularly the ones that are in orbits that approach that of Earth, for the last 20 years or so in a very systematic way. And this controversy that you mentioned is concerning only one space-based telescope that offers up only a small fraction of the asteroids that have been discovered to date. So the ground-based telescopes that NASA funds annually to the tune of about $50 million a year, they do a fine job of tracking and discovering new asteroids every year, but that process is very slow. And so that controversy only affects the results from this NEO-WISE spacecraft. All the other tracking programs that NASA funds are going great guns, and there are over 18,000 near-Earth asteroids discovered to date. Now we have to accelerate that pace, as Ed has just mentioned, and we can do that with another more capable space-based telescope, or we can just wait a long time for the ground-based telescopes to weigh in. So I'm confident that we're on track to discover the smaller asteroids that we just talked about, the ones that can still threaten regions or metropolitan areas of the Earth. We have to do it faster, in my view, and that means launching a space-based telescope, I hope with international support.
And how far are we from that? What do we still need to get that space-based telescope that would provide that acceleration that you say we so desperately need?
Okay, so NASA spends about $50 to $60 million annually on asteroid detection and warning and technologies, and we would have to double that pretty much over the next 10 years to fly this space-based telescope. It competes with science missions. However, this is a public safety mission, and I think NASA should put the appropriate priority on that and get that job done in about the next 10 to 15 years.
You know, Ed, many of those watching have seen the maps of the destruction, and they're aware. I mentioned Tunguska, right, as the reason for Asteroid Day, or the reason you observe it on the day that we do. But if an asteroid the size of the one which hit a remote area of Russia, of the Tunguska asteroid, struck New York or London now, modern New York or London, if you just look at a map of New York, everyone can see what the destruction would be. You'd be talking about the powerful, a bomb is 500 times more powerful, for example, than the one which hit Hiroshima. Millions and millions of people could die. What do we do now, Ed? I mean, when I hear that, obviously, I'm scared, as is everyone, because we don't know really what's out there. Something a lot smaller could cause huge damage. We don't really know what's there, and yet you say fear is not the main word you would use to describe where we are right now.
No, I think we've got an opportunity here. I think we've got a brand new frontier that we're moving out into, and that's space. And that, whenever you have a new frontier, the first thing you really need to do is map and chart the objects that are out there. And in this case, most of the objects in the solar system are currently untracked. And those are the asteroids we're talking about, both small and large. And I think that if you really look at that, I mean, this is our ticket to expanding out into the solar system. It's where the resources are. It's our navigation aids. It's also the things that sometimes hit the Earth. But you can solve all those problems. You can open up the solar system by getting a proper, complete map of the asteroids in our solar system. So I really look at this as an opportunity.
And how far away, Ed, do you think we are of having a complete map? If you were to get what Tom just referenced, say double the resources from NASA or elsewhere, but that space-based telescope, how far are we from getting that map if all that fell into place?
Well, we're making good progress. Tom mentioned this space-based telescope. There is also a very, very large ground-based telescope currently under construction called the LSST, which is coming online in a few years. It's going to really revolutionize the number of asteroids we find. And there are new technologies to find the ones that even those telescopes are going to miss. And so I'm pretty confident that in the next decade or so, couple of decades, that we should have a very good inventory and an accurate track of all the asteroids in our solar system that are both useful as well as potentially dangerous.
And Tom, you know, when we talk about that, I mean, the one which obviously struck Russia, what was it, in 2013, which miraculously nobody was killed, right? But people had temporarily lost sight, hearing. Again, luckily it didn't strike right in the midst of a city, or something much more horrific could have happened. But that was about 60 feet in diameter. When we talk about the LSST or a space-based telescope, will they be able to see asteroids that small?
That's the problem. The ground-based telescopes can only go after the mid-sized asteroids because of how much light that they can collect. And so the 60-foot asteroid that struck Chelyabinsk, we only know about 1% of that population so far. And so LSST will help with the mid-size asteroids, those that are about 100 or 150 meters across that Congress has directed NASA to search for. So it'll do a pretty decent job over a couple of decades against them. But to get the smaller ones, we're going to have to go to space using infrared or heat-sensitive camera to capture those. So that's the challenge, and I hope NASA can pull in some international support to build and operate that spacecraft.
You know, Eb, when you mention how important it is to, when you have a new frontier, to map it. I mean, we do have a new frontier, and we hear about it all the time now when, you know, whether you hear Elon Musk, right, or Jeff Bezos or Tesla, right, you know, you're hearing about going to the moon and going to Mars and a new frontier. But there's a recent poll out of Pew, actually, also from June, in the United States. So this is just Americans, but they were basically asked what should be the biggest priority for NASA. Top was monitoring parts of the Earth's climate system. 63% of those polled said that should be number one. And almost tied, essentially statistically tied, monitor asteroids at 62%. Only 18% said going to Mars should be a top priority, and only 13% said going back to the moon should be the top priority. That's got to feel like success to you.
Well, to me, I wasn't surprised by the results of that, because we've been talking about the importance of asteroids for some number of years right now, and people get it. And people understand that you do want to know where these things are, and you do want to make sure that we protect ourselves in case one of them hits the Earth. And so I think it matches what I hear people saying when I go out and talk about it. So I believe that this really is an important thing, and people are getting it.
Now, Tom, what about these private companies? I mean, I guess it's good. You don't just have the government doing it, right? You got private companies involved in private capital, and that means more capital can be deployed for big questions about the frontier of space. But do you think that spending so much money as they are on basically these rockets to go to Mars and the moon is the best way to spend that money, or do you wish that they perhaps saw the value of what you're doing a little bit more?
I think that commercial enterprises are very interested in asteroids. Ed referenced the map that he'd like to see developed, and that points the way to asteroids that have the right resources, water being the most important, and then some valuable metals. Radiation shielding from just the dirt on asteroids is very useful as well. We can make use of the asteroids that come close to the Earth and the Moon, and that will help us stepstone our way out to Mars over the next couple of decades. So we ought not to ignore asteroids. We ought to make them part of our plan to practice on the Moon and then get ourselves out to Mars using the resources they offer. So we don't have to haul up all this valuable rocket fuel and the water for the astronauts, the oxygen that they breathe.
So you're saying you could harness some of that if you could, once you learn how to harness an asteroid.
That's right.
You could use that somewhere.
We take our catalog of asteroids, hazardous or non-hazardous, and from them we get the ones that offer the most in terms of resources that can generate a profit for private companies. NASA can buy those resources and lower the cost of getting us out into deep space as a species.
So one of the things that I think is so interesting about both of you to so many people is just what you've seen that the rest of us have not seen, right? You've been there. You've been up there. Cumulative, 259 days in space between the two of you. You've flown multiple missions. You've been on the International Space Station. You've done the spacewalks. You have seen our fragile, beautiful little planet from a vantage point that very few in this world have. How do you feel, Ed, about American astronauts going to space from the United States again this year? Obviously, we've been sort of piggybacking using the Russians, and you yourself, I know, have gone up on the Soyuz. What do you think about that priority?
Well, I think it's great. I am really looking forward to see Americans launching from American soil on U.S.-built rockets. And that day's coming very soon. And I plan to be out there cheering on.
And you, Tom, I imagine you will be there as well.
I'll be standing right next to Ed and cheering those crews on. We need to get our own space launch capability back. That's something I hope that will happen this winter. And of course, that's built on the shoulders of commercial enterprises like SpaceX and Boeing in this case, and they'll be involved intimately with our ability to go back to the moon. They'll provide the landers probably on a commercial basis and some of the elements of this space outpost that we hope to put around the moon. So it's a private-public partnership going forward, and I think the attractions of asteroids will build into that plan, as we've mentioned. So it's a great thing that we're going to get back on our own feet.
Well, of course, it'll be fascinating. And speaking of feet, we'll get to check and see how those footprints are still there and whether there's been any change at all, obviously.
And go to new places, too.
Yeah, and to go somewhere new.
Yeah, we can lay down new tracks.
Yeah. Thank you both so very much on this important day. I appreciate your time.
Privilege.
Thank you very much.